What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all the stats of every one of the weapons in Black Ops Cold War's multiplayer, and in today's episode we're going to be covering the brand new SMG. This is the OTS-9. And starting it off as always, let's have a look at our damage profile, which is 35, 25, 23, meaning it's going to be a 5, 6, or 7 shot kill. It's also worth noting there are no body multipliers in Cold War's multiplayer for this, so anywhere in the body deals the same damage. As for headshots, we get a pretty standard multiplier at 1.4, and this essentially means that in the maximum damage range right up close, it only takes one headshot mixed in with body shots in order to reduce the number of shots to kill down to 4, which is great. But then at mid-range, it takes 3 headshots, and then at the longest ranges, it takes 2 headshots mixed in with body shots. As for our rate of fire, this is 857 rounds per minute, which is actually identical to the MP5 in this game. And what this means for our time to kill potential is up close, it's 280 milliseconds, which is a very solid time to kill up close. Then it drops down to 350 milliseconds at mid-range and 420 milliseconds at the longest ranges. It's also worth noting that up close, if you land that one single headshot mixed in with body shots, which isn't too difficult to do, our time to kill potential is 210 milliseconds, which is crazy fast in this game. Very few guns in the game will compete at that time to kill value. Then let's get into our bullet velocity, which isn't so great. It's only 250 meters per second. Up close, this is generally not going to cause any issues, but if you are trying to stretch those ranges out at all, this will start to cause you to miss shots against moving targets. Speaking of ranges, we actually get a slightly better 5-shot kill range than the MP5 at about 12 meters, and then our 6-shot kill range will extend out to 20 meters, which is right in line with the MP5. We can also see that with the various barrel attachments, we can be increasing our damage ranges a little bit. And then, of course, with suppressors, we reduce those damage ranges very slightly. And then finally, for ranges, let's have a look at hardcore game modes, and our one-shot kill potential is only 12 meters. This isn't really your best bet for hardcore game modes. Of course, everything is usable in hardcore, but it's not one of the better SMGs for that mode. But moving on, let's get into Hipfire, which is pretty standard for SMGs, and that is to say it's quite good at hip-firing. And then when it comes to idle sway, there's actually very little idle sway while aiming down sight. This thing is quite precise for that first shot accuracy. As for the rest of the shots though, when you actually start firing the gun, when we look at recoil here, it does kick really strong upward and to the right immediately after the first shot you fire, but then it sort of corrects itself and recenters itself back to normal. Without any attachments at least, this isn't a very accurate gun. You're most likely going to be wanting to use some form of a grip attachment to keep this recoil under control a little bit. Now, let's move on to our handling and mobility stats, and for our aim down sight time, this is 275 milliseconds, which is right around normal for SMGs in this game. And then when it comes to sprint out time, our stated sprint out time is 350 milliseconds, and this is one of the rare occurrences where our experienced sprint out time is exactly the same, and that means this has a very slow sprint out time for SMGs. The only SMG that has a slower sprint out time is the LC-10, and therefore this is something you absolutely have to take into account while building your class setups and playing in-game, because this will cause you to lose gunfights if you're an aggressive player. As for our reload add time, this is 1.72 seconds, which is fairly standard for SMGs, and then you can see what all of the magazine attachments will do to your reload time. It's also worth noting our base magazine capacity is only 20 rounds, so you're most likely going to want to choose one of these magazine attachments. But finally, for base stats without attachments, let's get into our movement speeds, which are all just standard for SMGs in this game. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. These are all standard values. So, just a little recap on the basics of this gun. For the strengths, it has a very solid time to kill up close. This is going to beat most guns in close quarters fights. Also, with only one headshot mixed in with body shots up close, you can reduce that time to kill even further. And then also, it's worth noting that this is very similar to the MP5 in almost every way. It's the same as the MP5. However, it does have a slightly better range capacity up close. As for the weaknesses though, it does have fairly high recoil, so that will limit it at longer ranges, and you'll likely want to use a grip attachment. It's also got quite a slow sprint out time for an SMG, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And then finally, its base magazine capacity is only 20 rounds, which you will burn through very quickly with this fast fire rate as well. So that's basically 3 areas where you have to be using attachments if you want to make up for those. And before we get into some great attachment combinations for this gun, I just wanted to mention the Task Force barrel. Since this is quite unique, it does boost our damage, but I wanted to point out, just like with most guns in this game, this won't change the number of shots to kill to the body at all. So it's still going to be a 5, 6, or 7 shot kill. And then when it comes to headshots, it's still going to take one single headshot up close to reduce the time to kill. 2 headshots at mid-range now instead of 3, so there's a slight improvement there. And then at longer ranges, it's once again just going to take 1 headshot mixed in with body shots in order to help. The problem with this though is it also increases our recoil, which you can't really afford to do with this gun. This is the Recoil with the task force barrel, which is completely out of control, and you'll be practically useless beyond very close quarters fights, which is where we already get that great headshot potential anyway, and therefore, effectively speaking, the task force barrel is useless on this gun, and you should stay far away from it. And with that, let's finally get into some great attachment combinations that you can use with this gun. The first one I'm going to be sharing for you guys is my personal favorite. This one's just great all around. It makes up for all the weaknesses, and it actually makes it a pretty solid all-around gun. With this, we're using the GRU suppressor to stay off the radar and also get a little bit of recoil control in there. The VDV reinforced barrel, just because we get a nice balance of effective damage range as well as bullet velocity. Then the Spetsnaz grip to help with that recoil, which as you can see here, the recoil is not too bad now with this setup. And therefore you can stretch this out to mid to somewhat longer ranges and still be relatively effective. Obviously you're not going to be like picking people off across the map or anything, but it definitely makes this a lot more versatile. After that, we've got the 40 round mag. This is my preference for this gun just because it burns through all of the smaller magazine capacities way too quickly. And then finally, we've got the no stock attachment to make up for its horrible sprint out time. And there we go. We've now covered all of the weaknesses of this gun, and it's just a nice balanced overall build. The one thing to keep in mind though is our aim down sight time is a little on the slow side for an SMG, so if you wanted to sacrifice sprint out time instead, I would swap the no stock attachment for one of the grip attachments to help with our aim down sight time, as long as it's also not a grip attachment that hurts our sprint out time, because we just can't afford to make it any worse than 350 milliseconds. But like I said, that's my preference. That's how I'm going to run this gun 99% of the time in multiplayer. However, I also wanted to show you guys just an alternative, and this is going to be more of a Hipfire build. And with this, we've just got the standard suppressor. We've got the GRU 5mW laser to get a tighter Hipfire spread, the patrol grip to help with our sprinting movement speed, as well as our sprint to fire time, which is nice. Once again, we're using the 40 round mag just because that's the best to use for this gun, in my opinion. And then finally, we are again using the no stock attachment in order to get the best sprint out time possible. I realize this does hurt our hipfire accuracy a bit, which might seem counterintuitive, but if you are going to be hipfiring with this gun, you have to get that sprint out time under control, and therefore it's worth sacrificing a bit of that hipfire accuracy. So this one's great for those close quarters maps where you're just going to be running around hip-firing most things. It's not going to have the greatest recoil control out there, so just keep that in mind. You won't want to try and pick people off at longer ranges with this, but it's fun to use as a hip-fire build. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the OTS-9. Overall, I do enjoy this gun quite a bit. I find it to be quite usable. It is very comparable to the MP5, so if you like the MP5, you're probably also going to like this gun as well. However, that really slow sprint out time is a bit annoying to be dealing with. Of course, those are just my opinions on this gun. I'd like to hear in the comment section below, in Cold War's multiplayer, what do you think of the OTS-9 so far? Do you really like this gun? Do you hate it? Or are you just kind of indifferent to it? Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.